Hello everybody, my name is Michael, and in today's video what we're going to be doing is this right here. So if that looks exciting to you guys, please carry on and watch the video. Oh, and just one more thing before we go. Please consider like, commenting, and subscribing if you enjoyed the video. But now with all that out of the way, let's carry on with the video. Okay, so what we're going to do once we've first started priming it, as you can see, I've just primed it up in just a normal matte white. What we're going to do is we're going to start off by painting her skin. So starting off with some neutral flesh here. This is a nice neutral tone of skin as it suggests, and we're just going to be applying it to Lady Val's face and her hands. Those are the only places that are nice and exposed with skin, so just a little bit here. Making sure that we've thinned down our paint enough, and we're going over in just 2 or 3 very thin coats, since the white and having the flesh on top is making it sort of very streaky, so you want to make sure that you add in just a couple of layers there to really get that smoothness that we're after. Then once we have those layers of neutral flesh applied, we're going to come in now with fairy flesh, which is a lighter skin tone of course, and all we're going to do is focus it more on the highlighted areas. So it's basically the top of the nose, the eyebrows, the top of her hands that are showing, the areas where the sun is sort of naturally going to hit and shine off, because basically we're using that neutral flesh tone as our shadow, and we're coming in with the fairy flesh as our highlights to give her a little bit more visual interest, especially since she's a nice sort of elegant pose that she has. We want to try and emphasize that and add a little bit more features and detail into that face, and this is going to be a nice easy way of getting that. And then once we have that done, we're going to come in now with some highlight skin, which is even lighter again, and we're just going to be doing it the exact same way we just applied the last highlights, but this time in a smaller quantity. So I'm just very carefully pretty much using the absolute tip of the brush or the very side of the tip, and just placing it in even smaller areas, and this is going to help bring out those highlights even more and add a lot more visual interest to that face, make it look a lot more realistic as well, and give it that more eye focusing point when you're looking at the miniature. Then once we have her skin all complete, we're going to come in now with some khaki, which is a nice sort of blondish sandy coloured hair. I've been looking at pictures of Lady Val online. She seems to be a blonde haired woman, so I'm going with that. I'm going with sort of a darker blonde hair rather than what I usually do, like how I did with the Lannisters in previous videos. I want her to be a little bit darker in the hair and separate it out, especially since we're going to be using some very similar colours on this miniature when it comes to the bones a bit later on. But it's just a matter of going over the hair, making sure that we get into all those little nooks and crannies. There's a lot of nice detail sculpted in the hair as well. Then once we have Lady Val's hair all completely painted up, we're going to come in now with some rhinox hide. And with the rhinox hide, we're going to be using it as the base colour for her nice fur cloak that she has around her. So rhinox hide is going to be nice base for this, because it's very, very dark brown, so we want to be using that for our shadows. And of course, as you can see as I'm painting here, it's got a lot of little detail sculpted into it, so make sure you spend your time really going around and picking out all those areas, because there's a lot of little nooks and crannies where you can easily miss. So don't be afraid to spend a little bit of time making sure that you get the fur completely painted over before we move on to the next step. Now that we have that base coat applied in our darkest colour, we're going to come in now with some mahogany brown, which is a reddish brown and also a lot lighter colour. It's going to add a lot of interest to the piece, and all we're going to be doing is dry brushing over top of it. As you can see, I'm using a small dry brush here, just it's a very small makeup brush. They make great dry brushing brushes, so it's a good tip for you if you're not sure how to get smaller and smaller dry brushes, especially since on these models they have very, very small areas, so you want as smaller sort of dry brushes you can possibly get. And all we're doing, of course, is just highlighting those high spots. And then once we've got that first layer of highlights on with our dry brushing, I'm going to come in with a second layer. And the second layer I'm going to be using leather brown here, which is just a overall nice, very light brown color, especially against the two colors that we've been using. And since we had the mahogany brown, which sort of has a reddish tone into it, and we're applying the light over the top, it's also going to be adding in a little bit more visual interest to the model overall when you're taking a sort of closer look, that you can see a few different colours in the browns as well. So just a little helpful tip there if you want to add in a little bit more colour to the piece without really noticing too. And now that we have our fur cloak complete, we're going to move on to the actual dress itself. So we're going to be using crusted crusted sauce, sorry, to do this, which is a very dark, deep red burgundy sort of colour. This is sort of a little bit different than most of the official artwork that I've seen of her. Looking around online, she's mostly completely depicted as white with white fur, and I was feeling that was a little bit boring for me, and I wanted to add a little bit more excitement to the piece, so I decided to pick out a few colours that I thought would work together, or at least hope work together while doing this, and really trying to add a bit more life to the piece. Especially since we've got bone, we've got blonde hair, we've got white on white on white. I wanted to add in a little bit more colour to the piece, and I think this crusted saw is going to really help out with that. And then with that picked out, what we're going to be doing is we're coming in with some skeleton bone now. And of course we want to be painting up all the bones she has decorated on with her clothing. So she's got that nice sort of front part to her dress, which is all covered in bones, as well as the skull that she's holding in her hands as well. So this is also why I didn't want to carry on with the white dress and the white cloak that I've seen in some of her artwork depicted. So I wanted to be a bit more different, show something else that you can do with the miniatures. You don't always have to follow what the box art or the official artwork has 100%, and it can still look good and effective. So this is my attempt at this anyway. So once we've got those all painted up, we can start moving on to the next step. Then now we have all those bones painted up, we're going to come in now with some mahogany brown once again, and this time we're going to be using it to be painting up the little bits of string or rope that is holding her sort of bone. I'm not quite sure what you call this in front here, but part of her outfit anyway. She's got all these bones stringed up in the front together, and we want to be using the mahogany brown for this as well. It's going to really help add in a lot more sort of eye-catching detail to the piece, especially from a distance as well. Then once we have that all complete, what we're going to be doing now is coming in with some ivory, and all we're going to be doing with our ivory here is we're going to be picking out the very high points of any of the bones. So as you can see, we've got the skull here. We want to be picking out around the brow, the nose, and just on these little ones that are on the front of her dress here, we're just sort of picking out very carefully along the strands, really making it like the light is bouncing off them, and it's going to help differentiate the parts too as well from her hair. Okay, we're moving on to our next step now, and that is going to be to apply some washes. And starting off first with flesh wash, and as the name suggests, we want to be applying it to her flesh or her skin areas, of course. And as you can see, I'm nice and out of focus here, so it's going to be a little bit tricky to see. Don't worry, eventually I'll get it back into focus. Always hard with miniatures to get them properly in shot while you're painting them. But anyway, what you want to be doing is we want to be very selective where we're placing these washes. As you can see, I've only got a small amount on my brush, and I'm really making sure that I'm focusing it just on the skin, really trying to avoid any of the bone areas and her hair as well. Since they're all very similar colors, we want to use the washes to help make every little part distinct. So we want to be as careful as we can when we're applying this. Then once her flesh wash is completely dried, we're going to come in now with some seraphim sepia. And seraphim sepia we're going to be using for two parts of the miniature. It's the skull and all the bones that she has on her, as well as her hair. And that's what I was saying, we didn't want to have them overwrite each other too much, because we're trying to make the flesh wash distinct, and since they're all very similar colors, we want to have them stand out a little bit. I know this is going to make the blonde hair and the bones be similar, but we're going to highlight up that hair and bones slightly differently, so hopefully we can bring that color back, because of course we're just using the wash for the shadows as well. So again, being very selective and making sure that we're not getting any wash where we don't want it. Then once that seraphim sepia is all dry, we're going to come in now with some agrax earthshade. And we're going to be using agrax earthshade for, of course, her nice fur pelt, but I'm not going to be doing it on her dress. I'm going to actually be doing another wash on her dress. Usually I do brown washes on the dress, especially since she's a free folk woman. She's out there in the battle and in the fray. You know, they're known for their hardiness. But I wanted to make Lady Val a little bit different and make her stand out a little bit more, especially when it comes to having her on the tabletop. So I'm not going to be doing a brown wash, making her down in the mud. I'm going to be adding a different wash instead. And then once that's all dry, we're going to come in now with our new color that I was talking about, which is carraburg crimson. And this is going to be used for a dress, because I said we didn't want to apply the brown wash to her clothing. We wanted to have it separated out a little bit, and instead we're using a red wash here, which is carraburg crimson, to really emphasize the red in her dress that she has here. Since it's a sort of maroon burgundy color, we want to punch that red out a little bit more, and this wash is going to really help us do that and make it look a little bit different on the battlefield, especially with the eventual free folk that I'll be painting up in later videos, where they're going to be nice and gritty and dirty since they're going to be out there in the muck. I want to make her stand out a little bit more and look like a piece of respect. Then once we have that wash applied and dried up, it's time to come back in with some crusted saw here, and all we're going to be doing is highlighting all those edges on the miniature there. So there's a lot of nice waves and folds sculpted into her dress, so it's just a matter of going around using the edge of your brush rather than the actual tip and picking out those areas carefully. And don't be afraid to take your time. You might want to build it up in a couple of layers. As you can see here, it's very hard to notice, especially since we placed the red wash on it, but I tell you, it is actually adding a bit of a difference, but it's going to take a few layers to do that, so don't be afraid if you don't start seeing results after the first pass. Okay, so once we've done those highlights there, we're going to move on with some khaki, and again we're going to be using it for the same place we used it before, which is her hair, her nice blonde hair that she has. We want to be applying the khaki color to just the highest points, and since there is some nice sculpted areas into these bits, you can really catch those raised bits with the edge of your brush, as you can see I'm doing here. And you want to also just do the front of her head as well, because I've made it so the sun is basically just hitting her from the front, so we want to have that nice bit of khaki color on the front of her hair as well, so you can see pretty clearly where the sun is coming from. And it's just a matter of going along using the very edge of the tip of your brush and picking out those nice little sculpted details. And then once we have that, she is complete, and all we need to do now is apply some color to the base. Now I'm just going with a nice standard black base, since she's not a combat unit, and I just want to have her on a nice plain and simple base. But it's totally up to you what you want to do here, whether you want to put her on a nice snowy base or to match in with the rest of your army, whatever you need here. But I'm just going with a nice simple black base to finish her off. And with all that complete, we have finally finished painting up Lady Val from the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game. So I hope this tutorial has been helpful for you, whether you want to follow along or you want to do something a little bit different from the norm like I just did here on this piece, making her a little bit different and to her official artwork. So I hope it's given you some ideas as well. But with all that said, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video.